Hello, everyone. I'm going to give it just a minute to see if anybody else wants to join the live stream, and then we'll get going, designing an animal. Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Eleanor. I am a university student studying sciences, but I'm also a guide leader. And today I'm going to be talking you through some of the science behind the task that I'm going to set you to design your very own animal or plant. So the important factor in this is not just designing any old animal, but specifically where that animal is going to live. So let's see if this will work. There we go. So the place that an animal or a plant lives is called a habitat. And a habitat is like the land around it, and maybe the plants, the air, the water, if it could be an underwater habitat, that provide an animal or a plant with the things that it needs to live. So this is food, water, shelter, and the ability to breathe, those kinds of things. But we also, as humans, like to group different habitats that are quite similar under different names. So examples of a habitat could be a forest, mountains, or the ocean. All of these are habitats because they're all places that animals live. And it's handy for us, instead of specifically being like, the new forest, to group all forests together because they all share similar properties. And that's handy for us understanding them. Now, the important thing about habitats for designing our animal is that animals are adapted, so they have things called adaptations, to the habitat that they live in. And this happens because of evolution. So you have an animal that's kind of a bit more generic, or comes from a different habitat and it moves to a new one, or the habitat changes. And over millions and millions of years, this group of animals will develop certain adaptations that make them better for living in a certain place. So examples of adaptations in animals could be things like warm fur. If an animal lives somewhere cold, then it's useful for it to have warm fur so it keeps warm. Flippers, if you've got an animal that is amphibious, so lives partly in the water and partly on land, or completely in water. So like ducks, for example, have flippers to make them better at going through the water. Or seeing in the dark. So moles are an example of animals that live mostly underground. So they're really, really good at seeing in the dark. So all of these things are adaptations that animals have that make them better at living in their habitats. So for example, let's go through this in more detail. An example could be a polar bear. The kind of habitat that a polar bear lives in is referred to as the Arctic. A polar bear in this case specifically lives in the Arctic, but this would also include Antarctica if we're talking more generally. And polar bears have different adaptations that make them good for living in the Arctic. So they have warm fur because it's really cold there. They have a thick layer of fat underneath their fur. In fact, polar bears have such good fur and such warm fat, they actually have more problems getting too hot if they run around a lot than they do getting cold. So polar bears never get cold, even though the place that they live can get down to like minus 40, 50 degrees C. They're also white, which means they don't show up against the snow, so other predators are less likely to spot them. They have big claws. Polar bears are carnivorous, so their claws help them catch and kill other animals to eat. And they have big feet because a lot of where they live is on ice, and the big feet help distribute their weight so that they're balanced very nicely on the ice and they don't fall over or crash through the ice. So that's an example of some of the adaptations a polar bear has. So the task that I'm going to give you guys, choose one of these habitats. So the three that I would suggest are desert, rainforest, Arctic. You could pick anything that you know. And I want you to design an animal or a plant that would be good at living there. So the way I suggest you do this is start off by having a Google, see what animals live in that habitat. So for example, if you're looking at the desert and you were looking at plants, you can have a look at cacti and see what adaptations cacti have that make them good at living in the desert. Or if you want to design an animal, you could look at camels or kangaroos and see why they're good at living in a desert environment. And then you need to design a completely brand new animal or plant that uses some of these adaptations that's going to be good at living in that environment. And if you want, you can share your animal or plant with us by asking your parents to send it to the Girl Guiding Midlands Facebook or midlands.headoffice@girlguiding-midlands.org.uk. And then we can see some of the amazing things that you come up with. Thank you very much.